President, Jennings.
Well, hi again. To me, this is always an amazing encounter. It's an amazing encounter because it's almost as if everything that is being shared was planned because it all sounds the same. And yet we're talking about different traditions, we're talking about people working in different parts of the world and really not communicating their ideas with the other in regards to what they're going to say, and yet, amazingly, it's the same thing. That should speak loudly, more loudly than we ever can, for a need to get past the illusion of separateness in terms of theosophical work, because again, it's all the same from different points of view as was expressed. This is an experiment for me because I have never read a paper from a platform. I've always run my mouth. But I thought this was different. And it was different because I thought it was a little bit more important than anything that I could come up with. So I've actually cheated. And this is really a collation of quotes. And I respect what you said about the belief, the trust, the knowing, and the understanding, because we do have to make these things real. But there can be so much misunderstanding about cross-pollination, about sharing, communicating, and getting caught up on different points of view as being right and wrong, that I thought maybe if we heard what HPB had to say, maybe if we heard what the masters themselves had to say, that it would be a little bit more authoritative than anything that I could say. So, here we go. Bear with me. How can ITC aim at being a practical example of, and I put it in this order, a nucleus, number 1, 2, a brotherhood, 3, a healing force? And the simple version, if you take away nothing else, are these 7 points. By 1, understanding our roots, 2, the true teachings, 3, keeping the teachings pure and clear as a reference point, 4, respecting differences, 5, engaging in respectful communication, 6, working together around a common purpose and goal, and 7, serving humanity and the world. Now, we've heard a brief example of what a nucleus is, and I'm not going to take too much time, but there's something inside the nucleus called a nucleolus. And in this example, I think it's very, very important because, at least in this mind, I think of that nucleolus as that root. The nucleus then relates to that root and then serves all of the purposes that were mentioned. So, according to these 7 points, what is our theosophical root? The source or root from which all divine wisdom as Theosophy arises comes through the arhats of the fire mist of the 7th rung, whatever that means, which are one removed from the root base of their hierarchy, the highest on earth. That's important. This root-based, this wondrous being descended from a high region in the early part of the 3rd age, before the separation of the sexes of the 3rd race. These sons of wisdom were a conscious production, a portion of the race already animated with the divine spark of spiritual superior intelligence. It was at first a wondrous being called the Initiator, and after him a group of semi-divine, semi-human beings. They are those in whom are said to have incarnated the highest Dhyanis, to form the nursery for human adepts on this earth. only one. The being just referred to is the tree from which, in subsequent ages, all the great historically known sages and hierophants have branched off. As objective man, he is the mysterious personage about whom legends are rife in the East, especially among the occultists and the students of the sacred science. It is he again who holds spiritual sway over the initiated adepts throughout the whole world. It is under the direct, silent guidance of this Mahaguru that all other less divine teachers become the guides of humanity. And as said by another of our teachers concerning their duty to humanity, the sun of Theosophy must shine for all, not for a part. There is more to this movement than you have yet had an inkling of. And the work of the TS is linked with similar work that is secretly going on in all parts of the world. That's an amazing thought. And yet we can't talk to each other, as if we knew what real Theosophy was and how that was being expressed in the world. The teachings of Theosophy, then, are the secret doctrine of the East, the wisdom religion or divine wisdom, the substratum and basis of all the world religions and philosophies. It is divine ethics and that force which harmonizes perfectly the divine with the human in humanity. Theosophy is the science of life and soul, reflecting the laws of nature and their intimate relations with and amongst all things. It is universal omniscience, while any theosophical society or organization at best is only a poor reflection, HPV words, an imperfect concrete body with its members not entirely free from sin, blame, misunderstanding, misrepresentation, or inappropriate application of doctrine. The bulk of this knowledge, which no man is able to possess in its fullness, constitutes that which we now call Theosophy or divine knowledge. It is from this wisdom religion that all the various individual religions have sprung, forming in their turn offshoots and branches, and also all the minor creeds based upon and always originated through some personal experience in psychology. Every such religion or religious offshoot started originally as a clear and unadulterated stream from the mother source. The fact that each became in time polluted with purely human speculation and even inventions does not prevent any from having been pure in its early beginnings. She goes on to say, it is only Theosophy well understood that can save the world from despair by reproducing social and religious reform. The doctrines, if seriously studied, and we can keep in mind what was just presented about belief, trust, knowing, and understanding, if seriously studied, where am I at? Call forth by stimulating one's reasoning powers and awakening the inner in the animal man, every hitherto dormant power for good in us, and also the perception of the true and the real, as opposed to the false and the unreal. Practical Theosophy is not one science, but embraces every science in life, moral and physical. It may in short be justly regarded as the universal coach, a tutor of worldwide knowledge and experience, and of an erudition which not only assists and guides his pupils toward a successful examination for every scientific or moral service in earthly life. Not one, every. But fits them for the lives to come. Not today, but for tomorrow and the day after. If these pupils will only study the universe and its mysteries within themselves. The only truth that we can know, therefore, of Theosophy as such, clear and unconfused, is that given by HPB and her teachers through their writings. That is not to say the applications can't be different, the points of view and understandings can't be, but that touchstone has to be. Therefore, it is this community of spiritually enlightened, if not perfected souls, existing as human beings, working throughout the ages for humanity, whom we refer to as Mahatmas and their message through HPB, typically unseen and most often unthanked, that ITC must rely upon, or else it has no foundation, no truth, no inner nucleus. Resting on the inner, ITC as a representation of Theosophy can become the outer nucleus. Respect. Respect for nuclear bonding amongst members, individuals interested in what ITC represents. To have good relations and communication, even amongst disagreement, it is important to have empathic respect. This is the ability to take on the perspective and belief of the other in order to examine such a position and facilitate understanding both pro and con. One, to respect the position or frame of reference of the other, even if we disagree with it. This guarantees a more genuine understanding and position from which challenging concerns can be thoroughly addressed. We must therefore be at least willing, if not able, to take on the other's point of view, their level of understanding, not ours, from the tradition they were adopted into, and the expressions therein used. Additionally, we must respect their efforts in the work for the great cause, the methods of working they have chosen to spread the word, their reasons, and if possible, their motives for doing so. Respect, we can have a mindful and meaningful communication, perhaps clarifying at times unclear statements, doctrine, words used in accord with the teachings as given. Without this, there is likely to be more confusion, more antagonism, more conflict, which are what the negative forces wish for us, to keep us separate and divided as a theosophic force for the world, instead of united, focused, powerful in our common work, like the sunlight through a magnifying lens. In a letter to AP Senate, our teachers state, "The only thing we deplore is the sorrow of the world, which can only be cut off by the philosophy you were such a potent factor in bringing to the West, and which now other disciples are promulgating also. This is the age of the common people, although you may not agree. And as we see forces at work gathering by you unseen, we must commend all efforts that give widespread notice to even one word of the philosophy. Therefore, our teachers appreciate all who work for Theosophy, each in their own way. Mindful communication amongst us all. To establish genuine trust and to be successful with meaningful communication so that Theosophic work can be fulfilled, we must keep in mind the being of the other. We must be flexible enough to be mindful of their expectations, their points of view, their frames of reference within which decisions are being made, their depth of perception into the Maya of the world, their desires and levels. If these are not matching in regards to communication on the same level, there can only be discord and miscommunication, misunderstanding and strife, as one will be speaking from a perspective and level that the other knows nothing about. Meaningful and mindful communication necessitates deep listening, suspending premature beliefs, negating personal criticisms and judgments, checking assumptions, ensuring accurate representation, asking clarifying questions, respecting acceptance, although not necessarily agreeing. And what might be further helpful is perhaps understanding the culture within which words are used to better appreciate the expressions of a language and its meaning. Communication should occur in a way that builds and reinforces, not by destroying early bonds being forged through the influence of our growing nucleus and membership. We must strengthen the cohesive force of this brotherhood, first amongst ourselves, then with humanity, through deep understanding, goodwill, compassionate recognition, altruistic service, generosity, charity, and love for the spiritual nature of humanity, at the same time working to ameliorate the suffering of the world. Although meaningful communication like this may seem and can be extremely challenging, it cannot and should not be able to destroy our true brotherhood and solidarity in the work of Theosophy, but on the contrary, strengthen it. When we arrive at communicating openly and honestly, questions often difficult and thought in silence may become vocally expressed. Questions such as, and some of these have been already addressed, whether others study the original teachings. Questions concerning misrepresentations of theosophical doctrine that might occur at times, sometimes purposely, sometimes by genuine mistake. Allegations of communications with masters and their giving orders. The mixing of non-theosophical doctrine with teachings that are theosophical and presenting them to an unknowing public as if they were pure theosophy, thus destroying the integrity of the original message. Questions about discussing what are considered sacred and private teachings in public indiscriminately from the views of those believing these things to be sacred. Questions about successorship, alleged leaders, the claiming of occult status, persons verbalizing that they are in communication, perhaps to sway minds. Many of these things occurred within the last 100 years. Use of pictures, use of sacred names, and whether cross-pollination means the muddying of the original teachings with everything that wears the title Theosophy. And I think from what we've heard, that is not the intent nor the meaning of cross-pollination. All of these concerns which can and have interfered with real communication, hindering true work together, at some time must be addressed so that no obstacles remain to prevent that sacred work from being done together. For the establishment of a true nucleus of universal brotherhood and moral virtue in the world. Anything less than this type of mindful and meaningful respect and communication can only reflect a partial, prejudicial obscuration by an input of personality and its desires. We know that personality is a false illusion constructed out of ignorance, hence its views that create and activate a me versus you, a right versus wrong, liking and dislike, better or worse, prejudice and bias, all leading to deterioration in communication and genuine listening, is a negative demonic force we must rid ourselves of in this work, not someone else, ourselves. HPB tells us union is strength, and for every reason, private differences must be sunk in united work for our great cause. And she stated that in the convention 1889. It is only true theosophy in unified action that can be a true teacher and a power for the world. How do we prepare ourselves to communicate meaningfully in work? By transforming ourselves. Instead of hiding behind anonymous comments, we must practice and exercise transparency, honesty, clarity, open communication, and have accountability for the life and meaning of the words we use and the actions we put in place. We must be willing to change our minds if the truth of a fact not previously believed has been presented with evidence. We should speak and work impersonally, dissolving that egoic presence which wants to be right, not wrong. We should avoid personal opinions not based on facts. We must not hold grudges based on differences, but understand those differences with respectful acceptance, although not necessarily agreement. We must cultivate the absence of every ill feeling, getting rid of backstabbing comments, non-virtuous emotional speech, instead sending goodwill and compassionate understanding to all living beings. We should be dedicated to negotiating all differences until we come to a conclusion that is in the best interest of the many. We should relinquish our vanities, our greed, our ambition, our selfishness, our egocentric views, our hypocrisy, and sensuous addictions, fighting within ourselves national, cultural, and individual prejudices. We should understand the implications of our words and the effect they have on others. If we are able to do so, we will find ourselves becoming the impersonal reflection of our spiritual egos and our great teachers in the world for the work. We will become impersonal centers and foci through which and towards which those higher benevolent influences flow for the benefit of humanity, as said by HPB. Putting it together. Can we be a nucleus, a brotherhood, and a healing power? Yes. If we know and remember from whom and what great cause we do this work, knowing that it is a completely impersonal and voluntary work. ITC, in its efforts, should focus on those actions amongst Theosophists and also through Theosophy that establishes such a nucleus based on theosophical principles, and through its members and associates extends such influence in the world, helping to ameliorate the causes leading to the hardships and suffering that humanity continuously and habitually encounters over and over again, as well as helping to raise that same humanity upward and inward along its spiritual path. And so we repeat, by understanding our roots, knowing the original teachings, keeping them clear, respecting differences, having respectful communication and understanding, and by working together with a common purpose and goal as we serve the world, ITC can become a practical example of brotherhood, as well as a dynamic power and force for healing a misunderstanding, struggling humanity, guided by the gentle influence of the divine wisdom of our teachers. We end this reading on a quote from those same teachers. He who does not feel competent to grasp the noble idea sufficiently to work for it need not undertake a task too heavy for him. But there is hardly a theosophist in the whole society unable to effectually help it by correcting erroneous impressions of outsiders, and perhaps amongst theosophists too, by himself actually propagating this idea of the brotherhood of humanity. Namaste.
Thank you, Gene, very much.